Hey everybody, Structural Steve back again today, and we're going to continue our rebar modeling series by going over guidelines and workspace setup. And these are two really important topics that are going to lead us into some really good stuff here in the video after this one, so stay tuned for more. Alright, so in that last video we went over kind of the overview of ProConcrete, the tools that are inside of OpenBridge Modeler, what they're used for, and it's kind of a broad overview, so if you haven't watched that one yet, go back and check that one out. But there's really only like one or two more things to talk about before we actually dig into the tools themselves and see them in action. And that's going to be the different level setups and guidelines, and even we'll get into a little bit on the display rules in this video. So let's start off first by talking about the levels that we have set up. So we're going to go ahead and go into the level manager and kind of take a look at some of these here. I'm going to go ahead and turn on a filter. I'm in the Workspace here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on a filter to just kind of show all of our rebar levels that we have in here. So I'm going to go and click on Rebar Modeling All to see all the levels that I have set up for rebar modeling. Now we're going to see quite a lot of different levels here. Now we have this set up in our workspace to where we have 15 different levels for every element that we think that we'll need to model rebar for in a bridge. So BM would be a beam, BW would be barrier wall. Obviously we have cap here for pier caps, columns, deck, foundations, footings. We have a miscellaneous level here to catch anything we might have missed out on. Pedestals, those beam seats, segmental box girders, and walls here. And then for every one of those 15 levels per element, we also have these levels with a underbar or a dash GL there. That stands for guideline. So guidelines are what are used to manipulate and place all of the custom rebar that we're going to use, especially for these bars up here. Probably most importantly, even the regular dispatch tool. We control the position of the rebar with guidelines. And when you have a model like you see in the background, like this pier here, you have a lot of different bars, and if you just had one level for rebar and then maybe one level for guidelines, you would just see a huge rat's nest. And it's really useful and really important to be able to isolate bars and be able to see what you're doing and know what guidelines belong with what bars. So that's the purpose of having all these different levels here for the different elements and the guidelines associated with them. So right now on my level display over here, I have kind of all the guidelines turned off and just all the bars turned on. I can go ahead and we'll just kind of look at maybe like this first one here, the top cap bars. I'll go ahead and turn on the guidelines I have associated with those, and I'll activate this one and then turn everything else off to kind of see what we're looking at here. So I use guidelines for two things. One, to kind of show me where I want my bars to like stop and start. Maybe some kind of reference line, and then the actual lines themselves that are controlling the position of the rebar here. So we can see these lines here. These are going to be the guidelines that I use for my, in this case here, the regular dispatch tool. So that's what these guidelines are. And we'll get into more about how to place these guidelines, best ways to kind of copy them and use them in like a drawing fashion. But right now this video is just kind of talking about level setup, what's needed for it, and explaining why we have all these levels and all these guidelines here. So again, if we had just one level for guidelines, you can imagine what that would be like here. So I'll turn on just all these guideline levels here real quick. We'll kind of see just how busy this drawing would get if, again, I only had that one level for guidelines. Right? It'd be almost impossible to understand this and see, and this is just the cap here, but just to be able to see what guidelines belong with what bars, it'd be very, very difficult. So that's why we have all these unique levels and then the guidelines that belong to those levels. So I know that this level here belongs to these bars here. These guidelines here belong to these bars here. So very important for this rebar modeling workflow to have a setup something like this, because it'll really just make your life a lot easier and save you a lot of time when you're actually going through the modeling process. So outside of the levels that we have set up here, we kind of explained the guidelines and how we use them, and we'll you have to understand those a lot more when we're actually using the tools themselves. So the only other thing I want to touch on real quick in this video here are display rules. There's another workspace setup kind of thing that's very, very useful for us. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly use a filter to get just my rebar elements themselves turned back on, and then just turn on maybe like my cap element just for kind of context here. And I'm going to turn off the display rule I have. Now, you can see over here in these levels, all the bars associated with a concrete element are the same color, but I have a lot of different colors here. And that's really, really useful for me to be able to see the different bars and what they represent and where they stop and where they start. And if I didn't have these different colors on in here, that'd be really hard to see. So that's done through a display rule, which are up here in the display style. So I'm going to click and hold that, open up the display styles dialog. And then I'm using the wireframe view, so I'm going to go and select the wireframe view. And notice I have this display rule called Rebar Colorized Levels. Now this is a new display rule that we've added in the App.Connect 2024 workspace. I'll give you kind of a quick little peek behind the scenes of what this display rule is doing here. Very simple. If you're not familiar with display rules, they're just used to manipulate. They're just used to manipulate level symbology, so you can change color, line style, line weight. Turn things on and off, a lot of different things. They're very, very powerful. We're using them in a very basic way in this application here, but definitely recommend checking out some of the different things you can do with them. But going into here, it's fairly simple. Then in this case here, we're just saying the condition is, if element equals, and then we're saying the level. So rebar cap 1 or rebar cap 2, all these different ones. They basically have a rule for all these different rebar levels that I used in this model. I said if it equals this, then change the color to red. If it equals rebar cap 2, change the color to green. And that's what let me kind of control the color of all these different bars and the different levels here. Now if I go ahead and turn this rule off, and kind of zoom in, zoom out here, you'll see now these match the colors of the levels that I'm using. So again, just having all one color for something is kind of hard to see what's going on in here. Especially up here in like the cap, right? A lot of rebar going on here. It's like really hard to see what it is that's going on in here. But as soon as I turn that display rule back on, it becomes a lot more clear. So you can see what stirrups are the outer stirrups, what are the inner stirrups, right? What are the skin steel here in the edge? What are the bars that are on the face, the shrink to temperature steel? Just a lot easier, especially now when you're in like a front view or a side view. That's when it becomes a lot more kind of clear where the start stop or the delineations of the bars are at here. So again, highly recommend using these kind of display rules. Super powerful, a lot of different ways to use them. And that's really it for kind of like the basics, the overview, kind of the setup stuff, and what we are going to need to get going. So in the next video, we're going to start digging into the tools themselves and really start having some fun with them. And again, this is an ongoing series, probably going to be at least, I would say 8 to 10 videos or more going into the rebar modeling workflow. So just make sure you subscribe so that way you get notifications when the new videos come up on the playlist. And we'll see you in the next video.